The whisper of chains. The stars blinked like cold, indifferent eyes, stretching endlessly across the black sea of space. For Captain Ethan Grayson, the vastness of the cosmos always brought a mix of awe and unease. Aboard the UEDF Dreadnought Vanguard, he leaned against the rail of the command deck, his eyes locked on the holographic projection of the sector before him. The ship's advanced AI quietly monitored interstellar traffic, flagging anomalies and identifying threats. For hours, the patrol had been routine, a monotonous dance of distant freighters and civilian transports. That was until the anomaly appeared. Captain, Lieutenant Zora Patel called from the sensor station, her voice carrying an edge of urgency. "We've got an unscheduled vessel 18,000 clicks off Theta 5. No transponder, no flight plan. It's drifting." Grayson straightened, his mind sharpening. "Type." "Medium hull freighter," Paddle replied, her fingers dancing across the console. "Old model, pre-Union design. Scans show irregular power fluctuations. Thermal readings are faint, almost dormant." Grayson frowned. A drifting freighter with no identifiers and barely any heat signature was a ghost ship in every sense. Yet something felt off. "Still no response to our hails?" he asked. "None," Paddle said, shaking her head. "They're either ignoring us, or they can't answer." Commander Joel Davis, standing at Grayson's side, crossed his arms. "Smugglers, maybe, or scavengers using an unregistered vessel. They got no business being this far off the trade routes." "Maybe," Grayson said, "but smugglers don't usually go dark. And scavengers wouldn't have wandered this deep into secured space." His gut told him this wasn't either. "Bring us into visual range." Quietly. The Vanguard's engines thrummed as the massive dreadnought adjusted course. Despite its imposing size, the ship moved with a predator's grace, closing the distance with practiced precision. The freighter soon appeared on the forward display, a scared and battered silhouette against the backdrop of stars. Its hull was pockmarked with scorch marks and jury-rigged repairs, a graveyard of a ship held together by desperation and neglect. "Magnify," Grayson ordered. The bridge fell silent as the hologram zoomed in, revealing the ship's name etched faintly on the side. Iron Vulture. Grayson didn't recognize it, but the name alone suggested trouble. "They've powered down everything except life support," Paddle said. "Minimal heat signatures suggest there are life forms aboard, but I can't confirm how many." Grayson's jaw tightened. "Prep a boarding team. If they're alive, we'll find out what's going on." Within minutes, the Vanguard's hangar was a controlled storm of movement. Marines donned their combat suits, checked their weapons, and ran through final drills. Commander Tessa Lang, a seasoned officer known for her unflinching composure, led the squad. As she stepped into the boarding shuttle, she gave Grayson a curt nod through the viewport. "We'll knock first," she said over the comms, a glimmer of dark humor in her voice. "But I don't think they're answering." The shuttle detached and maneuvered toward the Iron Vulture. The docking sequence was smooth, the airlock sealing with a metallic hiss. Lang and her team moved with precision, weapons raised as the hatch slid open. The freighter's interior was suffocating, a labyrinth of narrow corridors lit by dim, flickering lights. The air was stale and carried an acrid stench of rust, sweat, and decay. Lang's team swept through the entryway, their movements deliberate and synchronized. "Clear," one Marine reported, his voice barely above a whisper. Lang advanced cautiously, her boots echoing against the grated floor. She rounded a corner and stopped short, her breath catching in her throat. Before her stretched a cargo hold filled with makeshift cells, each one crammed with emaciated figures. The prisoners were a mix of species, humans, aliens, hybrids, all huddled together in silence. Their hollow eyes glinted in the dim light, reflecting a despair so profound it sent a chill through Lang's spine. "Captain," Lang said over the comms, her voice tight, "you need to see this." Grayson arrived moments later, flanked by 2 additional Marines. As he stepped into the hold, The sight hit him like a blow to the chest. The air was thick with the stench of confinement, the walls stained with years of neglect. Some prisoners flinched at the sight of the armed Marines, their bodies instinctively recoiling. Others barely moved, too weak or resigned to react. Grayson crouched near one of the cells, his gaze locking with that of a human woman. Her face was gaunt, her skin stretched tight over sharp cheekbones. She tried to speak, but her voice was little more than a rasp. "How long have you been here?" Grayson asked gently. "Too long," she whispered, tears pooling in her sunken eyes. They don't let us leave." Grayson rose, his expression grim. "Lang, get these people out of here. Every single one of them." As the Marines worked to free the prisoners, the ship suddenly lurched, throwing several of them off balance. The lights flickered, and an eerie mechanical groan echoed through the corridors. "Captain," Patel's voice crackled over the comms. "The Iron Vulture just brought some systems online. They're venting atmosphere in sections 3 and 4. It's a trap." "Lang, status," Grayson demanded. "We're still extracting the prisoners, but the ship's fighting back." "Whoever's running this didn't plan on being boarded," Lang replied. "They're trying to slow us down." Grayson clenched his jaw. "Then we pick up the pace. Get those people to the shuttle." Lang's team pushed forward, cutting through cell locks as quickly as they could. In the meantime, Grayson moved toward the bridge, his sidearm drawn. When he arrived, he found a lone figure slumped over the console. The alien's segmented body was riddled with bullet holes, its mandibles frozen in a snarl. Grayson examined the ship's logs, piecing together the puzzle. The Iron Vulture wasn't a freighter. It was a transport vessel for a massive slaver operation. The logs detailed drop-off points, trade routes, and even the names of buyers. Entire colonies had been raided, their populations sold like commodities. "Get me a direct line to UEDF command," Grayson said into his comm. Moments later, Admiral Nadia Veers appeared on the holographic display. Her sharp features hardened as Grayson explained the situation. "This isn't an isolated incident," Grayson concluded. "They've been doing this for years, and they're getting away with it because no one's watching." Veer's expression darkened. "Send me everything you've got. If this is what I think it is, we're not just dealing with slavers. We're dealing with an entire network." As the last of the prisoners were evacuated, Grayson stood on the bridge of the Vanguard, staring out at the drifting wreck of the Iron Vulture. His hands clenched into fists, the weight of what he'd uncovered pressing down on him. Humanity discovered the truth, he muttered to himself, his voice low but resolute. And the slavers are about to learn what that means. Shadows in the void. The Iron Vulture drifted lifelessly in the cold void, a haunting reminder of the horrors it had carried. Aboard the UEDF dreadnought Vanguard, Captain Ethan Grayson stood in silence, his gaze fixed on the holographic display of the captured freighter. Around him, the bridge was alive with controlled chaos. Officers coordinating the medical evacuation of the prisoners and technicians poring over the slaver vessel's data logs. "Captain," Lieutenant Zora Patel called from her console, her voice tight. "We've decrypted part of the freighter's navigation logs. It's worse than we thought." Grayson turned, his eyes narrowing. "Explain." Patel projected the data onto the central holotable. "The Iron Vulture isn't just a transport ship. It's part of a larger network. These coordinates," she highlighted several points across the map, "indicate multiple drop zones, all on the fringes of known space. Abandoned mining colonies, remote outposts, dead worlds. Perfect locations for trading sentient beings without attracting attention." Grayson's jaw tightened as he scanned the data. "How many lives are we talking about?" "Thousands," Patel said, her voice somber. "Maybe tens of thousands. And they're not just taking humans. There are at least a dozen alien species in the logs, some we haven't even cataloged yet." Commander Joel Davis leaned over the table, his expression grim. "This isn't piracy. This is industrial-scale slavery. Someone is running this like a business." "Someone," Grayson repeated, his voice cold. But who? In the Vanguard's hangar, the atmosphere was tense. Marines and medics worked tirelessly, escorting the rescued prisoners from the freighter into makeshift treat units. Rows of cots lined the hangar, each occupied by a gaunt, trembling figure. The air was thick with the muted hum of medical equipment and the soft murmurs of comfort from the crew. Among the prisoners, a Corellian male sat hunched on the edge of a cot, his translucent skin glowing faintly under the harsh lights. His elongated fingers trembled as he clutched a water pouch, his lidless eyes staring blankly at the ground. "Captain Grayson," one of the medics called, waving him over. "This one says he has information." Grayson approached the Corellian cautiously, kneeling to meet the alien's gaze. "You're safe now," he said gently. "No one will hurt you here." The Corellian's voice was a rasp, barely audible. "Safe? There is no safe. Not while they are out there." "Who?" Grayson pressed. "Who's behind this?" The alien's eyes flicked up, locking onto Grayson's. "The Syndicate. They own the chains, the ships, the markets. They are everywhere and nowhere. If you fight them, you must be prepared to burn the shadows." Grayson's stomach twisted at the cryptic warning. "Do you know where they are?" The Corellian nodded weakly. "The heart of their web. It's hidden in the Ixera system. But beware, they will not let you come and go freely." The name Ixera sent a ripple of activity through the Vanguard's bridge. Paddle cross-referenced the location with known star charts, bringing up a remote system on the edge of the galaxy. It was a desolate cluster of dying stars, far from any trade routes or inhabited worlds. "Perfect for staying off the radar," Patel muttered. "No wonder no one's caught them yet." Grayson stood over the display, his mind racing. "What do we know about the system?" "Not much," Patel admitted. "It's mostly uncharted. A few gas giants, some asteroid fields, and a lot of stellar debris. No signs of active colonies or stations, but if the Syndicate is operating there, they've likely cloaked their facilities." Commander Davis frowned. "It's a trap. They'll know we're coming long before we get there." "That's a risk we have to take," Grayson said firmly. "We've got the location. Now we need the fleet." The transmission to UEDF command was tense, the gravity of the situation palpable. Admiral Nadia Veers appeared on the holo display, her sharp features unreadable as she listened to Grayson's report. "The Iron Vulture is just one piece of the puzzle," Grayson concluded. "We have evidence pointing to the Ixera system as the Syndicate's hub. If we act now, we can cut off their operation at the source." Veers was silent for a moment, her piercing gaze studying him. "This isn't just a military action, Captain. If we launch an assault on the Syndicate, we'll be declaring open war on a criminal empire that spans multiple sectors. The political fallout alone." "Admiral," Grayson interrupted, his voice steady but firm. "With respect, this isn't a matter of politics. This is a matter of survival. Every moment we hesitate, more lives are taken, more families destroyed. We have to act." Veers's lips pressed into a thin line, but she nodded. "Very well. I'll mobilize the fleet. But understand this, once we commit, there's no turning back." In the hours that followed, the Vanguard became a hive of activity. Orders were sent, coordinates relayed, and battle plans drafted. Grayson stood at the heart of it all, his mind a storm of strategy and resolve. The weight of what lay ahead was heavy, but he carried it without faltering. As the fleet began to gather, the Vanguard sensors picked up a faint signal, a distress beacon from a nearby system. Paddle brought it up on the main display. "It's faint, but it's coming from a civilian transport," she said. "Looks like they're under attack." Grayson's jaw tightened. "The Syndicate?" "Most likely," Patel confirmed. "They're targeting ships trying to escape their grasp." Grayson didn't hesitate. "Set a course. If they think they can take anyone under our watch, they're about to learn otherwise." The Vanguard surged forward, its engines roaring as it cut through the void. Ahead, the faint beacon grew stronger, accompanied by the flickering signatures of two smaller ships. The first was the civilian transport, its hull scared and its engines sputtering. The second was a Syndicate raider, sleek and menacing, circling its prey like a predator. "Open fire," Grayson ordered. The Vanguard's forward cannons lit up, sending a barrage of plasma rounds toward the raider. The Syndicate ship veered sharply, its shields flickering under the assault. Before it could retaliate, the Vanguard unleashed another volley, this time targeting its engines. The raider erupted in a brilliant explosion, scattering debris into the void. "Transport ship is hailing us," Paddle reported. "Put them through," Grayson said. The holo display flickered to life, revealing a terrified human woman clutching a child. "Thank you," she said, her voice trembling. We thought they were going to take us." "They won't hurt you anymore," Grayson assured her. "We're sending a shuttle to escort you to safety." As the Vanguard prepared to bring the survivors aboard, Grayson stood at the viewport, his resolve hardening. The Syndicate had operated in the shadows for too long, preying on the vulnerable and the forgotten. But their time was up. Humanity had discovered the truth, and the Syndicate would soon learn the price of their sins. The gathering storm. The Vanguard drifted amidst the stars, a silent sentinel in the dark void. Within its reinforced hull, the air buzzed with urgency. The Syndicate's trail was no longer a faint whisper. It had become a thunderous roar, leading Captain Ethan Grayson and his crew to the shadowed Ixera system. The Syndicate's hidden fortress was their target, but getting there wouldn't be simple. "Captain," Lieutenant Zora Patel called from her station. "Fleet Command reports 3 more vessels arriving within the hour. That puts us at a total of 9 battle-ready ships." Grayson nodded, his expression unreadable as he scanned the updated tactical display. 9 ships. It was enough to mount an offensive, but far from overwhelming. "Do we have confirmation from our allies?" Grayson asked. "Yes, sir," Paddle replied. "The Vasheri Coalition has dispatched 2 frigates, and the Terry Compact is sending a stealth cruiser. They'll rendezvous with us en route." Grayson leaned back in his chair, his mind racing. The Syndicate wasn't just a criminal operation. It was an empire built on blood and despair. Their reach extended across sectors, and their resources were vast. This wouldn't be a battle, it would be a war. "Commander Davis," Grayson said, turning to his second-in-command, "get the fleet commanders on a secure channel. It's time we finalize the assault plan." The War Council convened in the Vanguard's tactical briefing room, its holographic table alive with the projected layout of the Ixera system. Around it stood captains and commanders from the assembled fleet, their expressions grim and resolute. "The Ixera system is a fortress," Grayson began, gesturing to the holographic map. "Our intel suggests the Syndicate's main base is located on a hollowed-out asteroid, heavily shielded and surrounded by automated defenses. They've also got a fleet stationed nearby, frigates, corvettes, and at least 1 dreadnought." The room murmured in acknowledgement. The odds were steep, but no one had come here expecting an easy fight. Commander Tessa Lang, now acting as the fleet's tactical coordinator, stepped forward. "Our approach needs to be surgical. A direct assault would be suicide. We'll divide into 3 groups. The first group will engage their fleet head-on, drawing their forces away from the base. The second will focus on disabling their orbital defenses. The third will infiltrate the asteroid and take out their command center." "And the prisoners?" asked Captain Yalara, a Vasheri commander with luminous scales that shimmered under the briefing room's lights. Lang's expression darkened. "That's why the infiltration team is critical. We'll need boots on the ground to locate and extract any captives." Grayson nodded. "This isn't just about destroying the Syndicate. It's about saving the lives they've stolen. If we fail, they'll scatter, and it'll take decades to root them out again." The room fell silent, the weight of their mission pressing down on every soul present. Then, one by one, the commanders nodded their agreement. "We'll be ready," Yalara said, her voice firm. "Let's end this. The fleet move is won. their engines lighting up the void as they approached the Xera system. The journey was tense, every moment filled with preparation. Crews ran drills, weapons systems were tested and retested, and battle plans were reviewed down to the smallest detail. On the Vanguard's bridge, Grayson stood at the viewport, his gaze fixed on the distant stars. He felt the weight of command like never before. This mission wasn't just about strategy or tactics. It was about hope. For the prisoners still trapped in the Syndicate's grasp, this was their last chance. "Captain," Paddle said, breaking the silence, "we're entering the outer perimeter of the Xera system. Long-range scans are picking up multiple ships. They know we're coming." Grayson's lips pressed into a thin line. "Good. Let's give them something to worry about. Signal the fleet to hold formation. Tactical alert." The Vanguard's interior shifted to a red hue as the ship went to battle readiness. Across the fleet, weapons powered up, shields engaged, and pilots took their stations. The tension was electric, the calm before the storm. As the fleet closed in on the Syndicate's stronghold, the enemy forces moved to intercept. The Syndicate's ships emerged from the asteroid field like predators from a den, sleek, black vessels designed for speed and precision. At their center was a massive dreadnought, its jagged hull bristling with weaponry. "They're forming a defensive line," Paddle reported. "Looks like they're protecting the base at all costs." Grayson's eyes narrowed. "And we're going to break that line. All ships, engage on my mark." The void erupted into chaos as the fleets clashed. Plasma bolts and missile trails crisscrossed the battlefield, lighting up the darkness with deadly brilliance. The Vanguard led the charge, its forward cannons tearing through the Syndicate's smaller ships with ruthless efficiency. "Focus fire on their flanking vessels," Grayson ordered. "We need to clear a path for Group 2. The fleet moved with precision, their coordinated strikes dismantling the Syndicate's formation. But the enemy wasn't backing down. The Syndicate's dreadnought unleashed a barrage of torpedoes, forcing the Vanguard to veer sharply. "Shields at 70%. Davis called out. "They're targeting us directly." "Let them," Grayson said, his voice cold. "We'll draw their fire while Group 2 moves in." Meanwhile, Group 2 approached the asteroid, their stealth ships slipping past the chaos to target the orbital defenses. The Syndicate's turrets and automated drones sprang to life, unleashing a hail of fire. But the attackers were relentless, using advanced jamming technology to blind the defenses long enough to deliver crippling blows. On board the lead frigate, Commander Lang directed the assault. "Hit their power generators. Without those, their defenses are useless." Explosions rippled across the asteroid's surface as the turrets went dark one by one. With the path clear, Group 3 launched their shuttles, racing toward the asteroid's surface. Inside the Syndicate's base, the atmosphere was one of controlled panic. Armed guards rushed through dimly lit corridors, barking orders and preparing for the inevitable breach. In the central command chamber, a tall, insectoid alien with gleaming kit and armor watched the unfolding battle on a massive display. "They're stronger than expected," the alien hissed, its mandibles clicking in agitation. Another figure, a human with cold, calculating eyes, stepped forward. "But they're predictable. Let them come. The deeper they push, the more vulnerable they become." The Syndicate had ruled the shadows for decades, its leaders always a step ahead of their enemies. But this time, they had underestimated one thing: humanity's resolve. As Group 3 breached the base, the corridors filled with the sound of gunfire and explosions. Marines moved with ruthless efficiency, cutting through the Syndicate's defenses as they pushed toward the central command chamber. "Keep moving," Lang shouted, her rifle cutting down a guard. "We're almost there." Ahead, the prison blocks loomed, their cold steel walls lined with cells. Inside, the captives watched with wide, fearful eyes as the Marines fought their way closer. "We're here to get you out," Lang called, her voice carrying over the chaos. "Stay down and stay quiet." The Syndicate's guards fell one by one, their resistance crumbling under the Marines' assault. As the last cell was unlocked, Lang turned to her team. "Secure the prisoners and get them to the shuttles. I'm going after their leader." Back on the Vanguard, Grayson watched as the Syndicate's fleet began to retreat. The battle was far from over, but for the first time, victory felt within reach. To all ships, Grayson said over the comms, his voice steady. "We came here to end this. Don't let up. Not until the Syndicate falls." The battle for Ixara had begun in earnest, and the Syndicate was about to learn the price of their crimes. Into the heart of darkness, the chaos of battle engulfed the Ixara system, a swirling storm of fire and destruction. Across the void, the UEDF fleet and their alien allies pressed their assault against the Syndicate's forces. But the fight wasn't just in the stars. Deep inside the asteroid fortress, the true battle had begun. The air in the Syndicate's base was thick and stale, punctuated by the sharp stench of scorched metal. Commander Tessa Lang led the Marine strike team through the labyrinthine corridors, their boots pounding against the grated floors. The sound of distant gunfire and explosions echoed around them, a reminder that the Syndicate wasn't giving up without a fight. "Status." Lang barked, her rifle raised as she scanned the dimly lit passage ahead. "Prisoners are secured and en route to the extraction point," Sergeant Hale replied, his voice crackling over the comm. "Resistance is heavier the deeper we go, but we're holding." Lang nodded, her eyes narrowing. "Good. We're heading for the command center. They're not walking away from this." The team pressed on, their movements precise and coordinated. The base's defenses were faltering, but every step closer to the heart of the Syndicate brought greater resistance. Armed guards emerged from concealed alcoves, their weapons blazing. The Marines responded in kind, their training and superior firepower cutting through the opposition. "Push forward," Lang shouted, her voice steady despite the chaos. "We're almost there." Back on the Vanguard, Captain Ethan Grayson watched the battle unfold on the holographic display. The Syndicate's fleet was faltering, their formation in disarray as the combined might of the UEDF and their allies tore through their defenses. Yet Grayson's focus remained on the asteroid. Group 2 reports the orbital defenses are down, Lieutenant Zora Patil announced. Group 3 is fully inside the base and advancing toward the command center. Grayson's jaw tightened, and the Syndicate's fleet. "They're retreating," Patil replied. "But their dreadnought is holding position, covering their escape." Grayson's eyes narrowed. "It's a diversion. They're buying time for something. Focus fire on that dreadnought. I want it neutralized." The Vanguard's cannons roared to life, unleashing a devastating barrage on the Syndicate's flagship. The enemy vessel returned fire, its plasma cannons lighting up the void. The two dreadnoughts clashed in a brutal exchange, each vying for dominance. "Shields at 60%, Commander Joel Davis reported. "They're hitting us hard." Grayson's voice was calm but firm. "They're trying to stall us. Hold position and keep firing. We're not letting them escape." Inside the asteroid, Lang and her team breached the outer doors of the command center. The massive steel barrier groaned under the pressure of the breaching charges, finally giving way in a deafening explosion. Smoke and debris filled the air as the Marines stormed inside. The command center was a sprawling chamber, its walls lined with holographic displays and control panels. At its center stood the Syndicate's leaders, a mix of alien and human figures, their faces twisted with fury and desperation. Armed guards flanked them, their weapons raised. "You're surrounded," Lang shouted, her voice cutting through the chaos. "Surrender, now." One of the leaders, a towering insectoid alien with gleaming chitin armor, stepped forward. Its mandibles clicked as it hissed. "You think you've won? You're nothing but insects crawling into a web you don't understand." Lang's gaze was steely. "Your web is burning. Last chance. Stand down." The alien screeched, raising a clawed hand to signal its guards. Before it could finish the gesture, Lang fired. Her shot hit its mark, the alien collapsing to the ground with a guttural cry. The room erupted into chaos as the Marines engaged the guards in a brutal firefight. "Take them down," Lang ordered, her rifle cutting through the smoke. The Syndicate's guards fought fiercely, but they were no match for the Marines' precision and firepower. One by one, they fell, leaving the remaining leaders exposed. "Secure them," Lang commanded as the last shot rang out. The Marines moved quickly, restraining the Syndicate's leaders and securing the chamber. Lang approached the central console, her eyes scanning the data displayed on the massive holographic screen. "What are they protecting?" she muttered, accessing the system. The answer came quickly, and it chilled her to the core. The Syndicate's database was a sprawling network of coordinates, names, and transactions. Entire colonies had been erased, their populations sold into slavery. The scale of the operation was staggering. "Captain Grayson," Lang said over the comm, her voice tight. "We found their records. It's worse than we thought. They'd been operating across multiple sectors, targeting entire settlements." Grayson's voice was grim. "Download everything. We're taking it back to command. And Lang, make sure those leaders don't leave that room." Lang's jaw tightened as she turned to the restrained Syndicate leaders. "Don't worry, Captain. They're not going anywhere." Above the asteroid, the Syndicate's flagship was faltering. The Vanguard's relentless assault had torn through its defenses, leaving it vulnerable. The enemy vessel attempted one last desperate maneuver, charging toward the UEDF dreadnought with its remaining firepower. "Brace for impact," Davis shouted as the enemy ship unleashed a barrage of plasma torpedoes. The Vanguard's shields flared under the assault, but they held. Grayson's voice cut through the comms, calm and commanding. "Target their engines. Finish them." The Vanguard's cannons roared once more, their shots piercing the Syndicate flagship's hull. The enemy ship erupted in a brilliant explosion, its shattered remains scattering into the void. "Their fleet is in full retreat," Paddle reported. "The Ixera system is ours." Grayson allowed himself a brief moment of relief. "Signal the fleet to regroup, and get me a status update on the ground team." In the command center, Lang watched as the last of the data was downloaded. The Marines had secured the room, and the prisoners were being evacuated. But something gnawed at her, a faint vibration beneath her boots, growing stronger by the second. "Captain," she said over the comm, her voice urgent. "We got a problem. The asteroid's core is destabilizing. They've rigged this place to blow." Grayson's voice was sharp. "Get out of there. Now." The Marines moved quickly, their boots pounding against the floors as they raced toward the extraction point. Explosions rippled through the corridors, the asteroid trembling violently. The air was thick with smoke and the acrid scent of burning metal. Lang pushed her team forward, her heart pounding. "Move, move, move. We're not dying here." As the Marines reached the shuttles, the asteroid began to collapse, chunks of rock and metal breaking away into the void. The shuttles launched just as the entire structure erupted in a catastrophic explosion, sending debris hurtling into space. On the Vanguard, Grayson watched the explosion from the bridge, his expression grim. "Status: Ground team is aboard," Paddle reported. "No casualties." Grayson exhaled, the tension in his shoulders easing slightly. "Good. Signal the fleet." Mission accomplished. The Ixera system was silent once more, the Syndicate's stronghold reduced to rubble. But for Grayson and his crew, the fight wasn't over. They had uncovered the truth, and now they would make sure the galaxy knew it too.